there were configuring the different seats. You can set up different relative volumes between different loops. So kind of like if you were talking to me and someone else was talking at the same time, I can vary that mix, and more than likely the crew kind of has an idea over time of how they like that setup. So that's probably what they're configuring, and then like I mentioned, doing checks amongst themselves one at a time with one person talking and make sure you're not getting bleed over into someone else's comm, as it can be pretty annoying to hear.
Jack, and ready for comm checks, 1.4.
So now we'll listen in here as they run through all
Copy,
the different
let's do it. Let's go left to right across the vehicle. MS1, Commander, Pilot, MS2, comm check.
MS1, comm check.
Jeanette, loud and clear.
Loud and clear as well.
Comm check.
Matt, loud and clear.
It's same.
Comm check.
Mike, 5x5.
The same.
Full comm check.
And Alexander, loud and clear. Thanks all. Good evening, Crew-8.
Same.
That's the umbilical comm check. And next up is seat rotation. Report when ready for that.
Ready for rotation.
Copy, standby 1.
So I mentioned that was the umbilical comm check, meaning they'll still have to do what's called RF comm checks later, which we'll hear later on.
Yeah, there's different kinds of comms, right?
Exactly.
Ground stations, TDRS.
Different pathways, exactly. So they're getting ready to rotate the seats. So what the crew's probably talking about now is making sure they have all their hands and legs inside, restrained, nothing's out and about, so that when the seats rotate, you don't want to get anything stuck.
And why do we want to rotate the seats?
So the position they're in now is much more convenient to ingress in 1G. It's you're able to easily get in and out of the capsule. You saw they could kind of stand as they did that, but it wouldn't be the best to be in this position for launch.
Dragon SpaceX, initiating seat rotation.
If they were to stay in that same position they're at now, as the vehicle goes up, the force of the acceleration, or the gravity vector and the acceleration vector will pull the blood down towards the bottom of the capsule. So in the position they had been in, that would pull the blood out of their brain. So very similar to when fighter pilots fly and do G-strains to keep the conscious, it would be the same thing. And to avoid doing that, since this is a much longer ascent, it's a multi-minute thing, we rotate them onto their backs, and that way, when that acceleration vector pulls the blood down, it's still staying in their head. It's mostly staying in their chest and head, which is a much more sustainable, basically, body position to have.
Yeah, basically, you're saying that if they were to stay in the position that they were in, they could pass out.
Yeah, they definitely would pass out. Yeah.
How much G-force are you experiencing?
Dragon SpaceX, we see 4 seats in the launch position.
How much of the force are you seeing at launch?
And with that, you go for section 2, suit leak check prep.
All right.
It's about 4 to 5 Gs, Megan and peak, and it builds right before first stage cutoff and second stage ignition, and then the second stage kind of builds slowly from about 2 to 5 Gs by the time the second engine cuts off. So about 5 Gs peak.
Wow. And so what you just heard on the mission audio loops again is that they are they have confirmed that the seats have been rotated into the launch position, and now they are getting ready for suit leak checks, which again, you saw them do that in the suit up room. So this should look familiar to you. It's just now that they're in Dragon, they're testing it here. And as you can see, visors are down, they're all ready.
Exactly, and the reason we're having to redo it is you saw them open the gloves up before. Presumably they didn't have to use the restroom. They would have to open up the bottom part of the torso zippers. And so since they broke that seal, they now have to recheck it. But what we did rule out by doing the leak checks in the suit room is there's probably nothing mechanically wrong with
Dragon care complete. Ready for leak checks.
Copy, we see it. Your go for section 3.
There you go for 3.
In the back and forth, you're hearing it referring to steps. So there's overall procedure numbers, and then steps within that procedure, and that's what they're talking about. and there's different ones where you want to verify with the ground before you command it.
And you can tell that the suit leak checks were successful because we have a good view of Alexander here, but like the top of his suit is now approaching his head again
Yep.
because they're depressurizing the suit now that they know it can hold the right pressure.
Right, so you'll see them, it actually takes a few minutes for it to run, so you'll see them kind of hold still and just kind of sit there. It's checking both the pressurization and, like you mentioned, the depressurization, like the rate it comes out. Unlike the leak checks in the suit room, in this case, that you can actually also test out your ability to see the displays. It's like you mentioned, Megan, the helmet kind of expands up on your head, and so you want to make sure that you've got your chin and that helmet kind of interface into the pad and the foam around it, such that you can still see the displays if there was a depress event and your suit pressurized.
And the targeted time for seat rotation was T-minus 2 hours, 29 minutes. Suit leak checks, 2 hours, 28 minutes. So as you can see, we are
Running
ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and so unlike before, earlier in the flow where you saw they would just hold and wait for that whatever time was supposed to be done, at this point they'll let them get ahead because if there are any unforeseen delays later, you want to build all the pad that you can.
So on the right hand of your screen, we're seeing again inside the white room. Talk to us about what the SpaceX Ninjas are doing right now. We see them shining a light on the seal.
So yeah, they're doing hatch seal inspections right now. So more than likely visually inspecting them as well as probably photo documenting it and running video over it. So they've got documentation of what that seal looks like before they close it. And then once they've done that and actually close the hatch, they'll also start running through hatch leak checks, very similar to the suit leak checks, except on the hatch. The reason they're not doing that is because they don't want to start that process until they knew the suit leak checks are good. So some of the folks up there are suit techs. So if there was a problem with the suit leak check, you have the expertise on hand, already in the clean room, ready to go to basically troubleshoot it right away.
Oh, that's great. As you can see from the graphic on your screen, up next, hatch close. Again, first, successful suit leak checks we have to see. We have to successfully check the seal around the hatch, and then they will close the hatch, and that'll be the last time they open the hatch until it splashes